Let's talk about how we take this bathroom project from this stage to this stage. Hey guys, Adam here, doing a project today in a bathroom, installing a new bathroom faucet. We've got some new countertops and a new vanity, and I thought I'd show you the process of installing the new bathroom faucet and drain. So the installation of a new bathroom faucet is probably one of the more common home improvement projects that people work on. In this particular instance, we've got new countertops and a new sink. So the old faucet was removed, and in many cases maybe you just have an old drain or an old faucet that you're looking to update for aesthetic reasons, or maybe it's leaking and you're tired of it and you just want to install a new faucet. So it's really very simple. In this case, we're installing a Delta brand faucet. There's a lot of good brands out there. Price Pfister and Moen, and there's lots of faucet brands out there. I tend to typically go with Delta. I've had a lot of good luck with them. The installation is very straightforward. Just a kind of personal opinion, I would not go to your local home improvement store and purchase the cheapest faucet that you can find on the shelf. In my experience, those tend not to last near as long. Sometimes installation is more of a pain with those, and you're really better off getting one of the, spend a little bit more money and get a name brand faucet, and I think you'll be happier in the end. So we'll go ahead and open up this box. So typically with a bathroom faucet, what you're going to get is the faucet itself, of course. So we have the faucet. We also have a trim piece that goes on the bottom of the faucet. These are nuts that actually go on the bottom of the, I'll take these little temporary caps off of here. So we have these two nuts, and these will go on the supply lines here once you actually get it inserted into the counter. These will go like that and actually secure the faucet to the bottom of the counter. Also in the box we have a drain assembly, which is pretty typical with a bathroom faucet. They typically come with a drain. Always, for sure, in the better name brand faucets they will. So this drain assembly is composed of the actual drain itself that will go through the sink. It has the stopper. And it has the, the extension basically that will attach in the back to the handle here that you actually use to move the stopper up and down. Those are basically the components that you're going to find in a box. Now, in addition to the parts that come in the box with the new faucet, you're also going to need a couple supply lines. You may, if your supply lines are in good condition and aren't too old, you might be able to reuse those. Many times, if you're in an area that has hard water, you'll find that they've got a lot of lime buildup and starting to get kind of crusty. Typically, I feel like it's a good idea to go ahead and replace the supply lines, but if you feel that yours are in good condition, then by all means go ahead and reuse those. And then you also may need to get some drain supplies. So in this particular case, we've got a PTrap kit, and we're going to be using that to install the drain. Again, that may or may not be necessary. If you were just replacing the faucet, you most likely won't have to replace the PTrap, but it's only a few dollars from the home improvement store, and that's something that you may need as well. A couple tools we're going to use. I've got a couple of pliers here. Got a crescent wrench, and then I also have some silicone caulk. I'm using a tube of caulk and a caulk gun. You could also use, they make tubes that you can just squeeze by hand basically as well. So with those tools and these supplies, we should be able to go ahead and get started installing this sink and drain. Okay, so as the first step, we're going to go ahead and take the faucet itself, and we're going to take the trim that comes on the bottom of the faucet. Now, there are a couple different faucets. This is probably the most typical that you're going to find. Sometimes if you have a wide a wide set apart faucet, you may have a setup where you have the actual faucet itself, and then you may have two separate handles. So rather than the handle being attached as one assembly, you'll just have the faucet and then you'll have the handle, and those will actually all be installed individually, but the process is basically the same. So we're going to go ahead and take our trim ring, make sure that it's on the bottom there. That'll help make sure that we don't have any water coming down through. And then we're going to take our nuts and we're going to go underneath the countertop, and we're going to actually tighten these down to secure this faucet. And you know, there's going to be some movement. Once we get everything tightened up, we'll make sure that we have everything centered and nice and square to the wall before we tighten them fully. So those aren't tight, those are just basically snug down there so we start to get our location identified. Before you get everything tightened up, it's a good idea to go ahead and take your drain handle, go ahead and drop that down through the back of your sink. So the reason I'm doing this now, and what I'm doing is where I had it adjusted there before, this drain handle is actually hitting the countertop. So that's why we keep everything loose. Don't tighten anything yet. We can go ahead and slide it forward. Get to the point where we can actually get that down through the hole, and then we can start to adjust things. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come from the top, and I'm going to make sure that it looks nice and square to the back of the cabinet. And then I'm going to go back underneath and I'm going to hand tighten those two plastic lock nuts. Be careful not to move the faucet around. And just get those as tight as you can with your hands. It's a good idea to take a pliers and just snug those up a little bit. They are plastic, so you don't need to over tighten them, but you don't want it to loose. You don't want it to be so loose that it moves either. So as you can see, if you just take a pliers, place it in there, and then you can get that quite tight that way. Now when you're getting ready to install the actual drain assembly itself, what I like to do is always test fit everything. You're going to remove this cap here, and we're going to go underneath the sink, and we're going to lift the assembly up underneath the sink, and then this is going to go down on top. Now you need to make sure this lock nut here is screwed down all the way, and then this rubber gasket here will actually help create a seal so you don't have any leaks. Now we need to make sure that this is pressed down far enough so that this can fit up underneath the sink and so that this cap can come on. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and just dry fit this. I'm going to insert it, and then I'm going to go ahead and install the cap, and I'll just spin it from the bottom there. So that's tight. So I know that I have this nut down far enough. I know that this rubber gasket is down far enough because I can fully tighten the top cap. So now the next step is we're going to go ahead and install it with some silicone. Okay, so I'm going to prepare my tube of clear silicone. That with a small bead, And you'll want to make sure your top trim ring probably has a piece of plastic on it. Protect it from the factory, make sure that you take that off now. And you also want to make sure that you have some rags or paper towels. Try to keep this as clean as possible. Okay, so as a first step, we're just going to apply a small bead of silicone. Squeeze this until I can see it just start to come out of the tube. You want enough so that it seals, but not so much that you have a big mess to clean up either. Silicone is great stuff at sealing, but it's also very messy to clean up. So go ahead and drop that into the sink. And then I'm going to go below, and I'm actually going to thread this up into the bottom. Okay, so now I've got that hand tight. We're going to go down below and tighten everything up. Okay, now down below the sink, it's important to make sure that we have the drain turned so that this nut is toward the back. That's where your drain lever actually will come through. And I'm going to kind of hold this with one hand, and I'm going to start to turn this nut up. And this nut will turn kind of hard because we're forcing this rubber gasket up over the top of those threads. And I'm going to grab the pliers. And again, we're dealing with plastic, so we don't want to be overly aggressive, but we do want to make sure that it's good and snug as well. And I'm just watching that rubber gasket flatten out. So there, we've got that nice and tight. Now I'll come back up above the sink, and I'll take my finger and I'll clean up any excess silicone that might squeeze out. We have just a little bit coming out, so did a good job, just enough, but not too much. And we have a drain installed. Now the next step in the process, we need to install the actual drain stopper itself, and then the actual mechanism that attaches to the lever here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop the drain stopper into the drain, and you'll notice this little flange on the bottom is actually directional, so it needs to be toward the back of the drain, toward the back of the sink, like so. And then we get to go back underneath the sink again. Okay, so we're back underneath the sink. What we're going to do, again, make sure that this nut is facing toward the wall. We're going to take off this nut off the back of the drain, and then this lever with this ball goes through here, and I'm looking up here. I can actually see that I'm captured in that stopper. So I showed you the drain stopper with that little plastic flange. This is now inside there. As I move this lever up and down, it's actually moving the stopper up and down to open the drain. And this little plastic nut actually creates the seal. That's all the seal there is right here to prevent water coming out. So we're going to take this little slide lock off of here. We're going to slide our nut on. We'll replace our slide lock for now. And I'm going to loosely tighten this nut. And this needs to be loose enough so that it can fairly easily move when you're manipulating the drain, but yet you don't want it too loose, because if it's too loose, then this can actually leak water. So we're going to take this last piece here, and this blue piece is made so that it will slide over the drain lever, and that will also go over the actual lever that moves the drain up and down. Now, so I don't lose it, I'm going to go ahead and put this lock, and actually the way this should be is one end of the lock on, and then this. Now that's secured so it can't slide back and forth. So we're just kind of loosely, test fitting everything now, making sure that the drain has full movement up and down, which it does there. So I feel like we're pretty good there. So I'm going to, right now, just hand tighten this nut. And what this does is lock this blue extension piece onto the actual lever that you pull behind the sink. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a pliers. And we're going to snug this down. Okay, so we've got that snug. Now I'm just kind of testing. I think it's a little bit loose. I want to go ahead and tighten that nut up just a little bit. Feels pretty good. Now we'll go back on top. And just check to make sure we've got good movement here. And I actually have that a little bit low, so I'm going to adjust that so it's a little bit higher. But as you can see, as we move that up and down, the plunger goes up and down and closes the drain. And don't forget too that this usually has a piece of protective plastic on it as well from the factory. So go ahead and remove that. Okay, so for the next step in the process, we're going to go ahead and install the supply lines. Now if you're getting new supply lines, these come in several lengths, so you have to just measure and figure out what length you need. To attach them underneath the sink, you're going to be upside down and kind of on your head. It's a little bit awkward to get to. A pliers works. I actually have a kind of a specialized tool here that is made for actually putting on nuts underneath sinks. This is, if you do very many of these, this is kind of worth the investment, but simple pliers certainly works as well. All right, so we're gonna start by just hand tightening. We'll start by hand tightening both the supply lines. And once they're hand tight, take your pliers. In this case, I'll use my extension tool. I honestly don't even know what this tool is called. I just know that it makes life easier. One of the fun things about installing a sink is crawling underneath the sink, sitting on your head. Go ahead and snug that up, and then I'll do the other side. Okay, so once we have the supply lines attached underneath the sink, now we're going to go ahead and attach them to the valves. Same as before, we're going to hand tighten first. And then once we have them hand tight, we're going to take preferably a crescent wrench, adjust it to the proper size. We're going to take another pliers. We'll hold the valve body with the pliers, and then we'll go ahead and tighten this nut with the crescent wrench. And like before, we need it to be good and snug so it doesn't leak, but we don't want to overdo it and break anything either. So then I'll go ahead and do the other side. Okay, now for the final stage of the installation, we're going to go ahead and, again, if you have a existing PTrap from your old drain, you might be able to reuse that. You probably can. In this case, we're actually doing a new installation. So we've got a new PTrap. I'll go ahead and get this opened up. So when you buy a new PTrap, it comes with, this one's actually 1.5 inches, which is probably what you need, we should need. And then it comes with all the pieces that you'll need to connect from the bottom of the drain and then actually go out to the drain in the wall. And it's got bushings for if you have 1.5 inch pipe, and then also if you've got 1.25 inch, which is what we need to go to at the bottom of the drain. So with these fittings, this should be everything that you need. So let's take a look at the installation. Okay, so when you're installing the PTrap, it goes together in this configuration here. And what this does, the whole idea behind a PTrap, is the trap here will always hold water. And what that accomplishes, it makes sure, since there's water here, it makes sure that sewer gases don't come back up and get into the house. That's the reason why you need to have this. If the drain just came down and went straight out, then that would completely clear itself of water, and you'd have sewer gases that would back up into the house and create a problem for you. So we're going to take a nut. We're going to put this on the long extension piece that goes into the wall, the J piece it looks like. And then we're going to take one of these gaskets, fits on here. This is 1.5 inches, and that's going into 1.5 inches. So that's a good fit. We'll kind of press that on. And then this piece goes in the bottom of the drain here. And as you can see, this is 1.25 inches and this is 1.5 inches. So that's loose. So then this comes with a thicker gasket. So you always need to put your nut on first, then your gasket. And the gasket goes always so that the rounded part, the smaller diameter part, fits inside your plastic fitting. So it goes in this orientation: nut, and then that gasket, and then this goes up underneath. And now what you want to do, you don't want to have stress in these joints. So as you can see, this is crooked, that's not good. We need to have that straight. When we straighten that out, it makes this crooked, so that's not good. So you need to just sort of play back and forth and find the proper position. Now, I can see that our extension piece that goes into the wall, I'm actually hitting the back of that drain, and I have a kink here. So I can tell what we're going to need to do is actually cut this piece off. Not very much, just 1 inch or 2 inches. So we're going to take this back out. Now when you're cutting this is thin, soft plastic. It's very easy to cut. You could just take a hacksaw blade and you could cut that off. truthfully, if you had to, and I have before, if you just use a sharp utility knife, and if you're careful, you can kind of score around and you can actually cut through it. I've got this little cutter like this, which works real slick for cutting these types of thin pipe. It's actually made for cutting PEX pipe, but works good for that too. So now we're gonna reinstall this and see if we have enough length taken off. You've got quite a bit of flexibility coming in and out of the drain here, so you don't have to be super particular. And I can see that right there looks like it's going to be a good position for us. So I'm going to keep things sort of loose. Press that gasket all the way to the back. Just make sure that you avoid binds, and I made a mistake. So as you can see, I forgot a nut, so that's not going to work. Let's take this back out. Okay, so here's another nut, so I just need to pull this apart. I'm gonna put this one on here like it should have been, because that actually applies to there. And by the way, there's no gasket here between this joint. This is actually creates a seal on its own. So there's no rubber or plastic gasket or O-ring that goes in there. So that nut goes on, and that nut, and that gasket. Okay. Now we go back to our loose install. Make sure everything fits well. Now we're going to start to snug things up. I like to leave this one and continue to watch it. It seems like if you have a leak, that one will like to leak before others. You can see that it fits nice and snug. So we've got everything lined up properly. Now everything's just kind of snug, and now I'm going to go back and hand tighten. There really shouldn't be a reason to put a wrench on these. You should be able to just hand tighten. That's why they have these ears that stick out. If you have a difficult time turning those, you can gently put pliers on there. But be careful, because it's just thin plastic and it will strip pretty easy. So there we go. So we've got our drain installed, we've got our supply lines installed. We're going to go ahead and turn on our water, and we're going to give it an initial try, make sure we don't have any leaks. Well, okay guys, here's a moment of truth. So I've got the water turned back on, and we're going to do a good check down here to make sure that we don't have any water leaking anywhere around the supply valves. I don't see anything there. I do have the valves turned on. Check up here underneath the sink. I don't feel any water up there in the fittings. So we'll go ahead and turn it on. I did give about 30 minutes or so to let that silicone set up. It sets up pretty quickly, but you want to make sure that that's dry. And it's normal to have a little bit of air in the lines, so it'll spit a little bit like that when you first turn it on. Now we just want to let the water run for a little while. We want to make sure that we don't have any leaks down here in the drain. And if you have a leak, it'll show up pretty quickly. And looks like we're in good shape. So there you go. It's a successful bathroom faucet installation. Well guys, hopefully you found that video helpful. As you can see, it's not too difficult to install a bathroom faucet. Something that definitely any homeowner should be able to do with a few basic hand tools. So hopefully you picked up a few tips from that video. If you did, and if you enjoyed it, please do me a favor and like the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and keep your eye out for additional DIY home improvement tips. Take care. Bye.